Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I have a new video for you, which is one that I've wanted to do for a little while now, but it took me actually crafting the rest of Wilds of Eldraine to get the rares that I was after from my chase card list. So this is basically just gonna be me revisiting my original video that I did when Wilds of Eldraine was first spoiled, and I was predicting the top 10 cards of the set, and I want to see how right or wrong I was in my predictions. So let's go. Number 10, Beseech the Mirror. Pick one of the first 4 cards from your library, fetch that card, it gains half its mana. Bargain, instead that card gains full mana. So this was my number 10 card. What is the actual rank for it now? It's just a top 20 card for me now. And so the reason is you have to bargain for this card to be worth using at all. So if you don't have a support that you want to destroy on the battlefield, then it's probably not going to be worth using. And if you destroy a support you actually want, the best you can do is just kind of trade it for another card that you want on the battlefield. So it's not very reliable as a way to get cards onto the battlefield. I think there are a lot better cards in Standard that don't make you lose a support just to do so. So it's still a fine card. It's just not nearly as strong as I hoped it would be. Next, we got Moonshaker Cavalry. This was my number 9 card. It's a Spirit Knight. When this creature enters the battlefield, reinforce each creature you control 1 time. Your creatures gain +X/+X and gain flying. X is the number of creatures you control, including their reinforcements. What is the new rank? It is number 7. So I rate this one a little bit higher than I did at first. I mean, at the end of the day, it's still just a creature that's making making your other creatures stronger, which in today's meta is still a really strong effect, but I rate utility cards higher than cards that just buff up your creatures. Though this is one of the best probably in the game now at doing so. So it's a really strong card, and I think it's still really worth using in a lot of decks, but you'll see why I rate other ones higher. But this card is really good, really worth having, and I think you should still chase it. We got Guillaume, Master Chef. I put this at number 8. When a creature enters the battlefield under your control, create 2 food tokens. When a player matches a food supports gem, a random creature you control without prevent damage gains prevent damage and reach until end of turn. What is the new rank? It is number 4. So this one jumped up high. This might have been the highest jump in my rankings, actually. So this card is really good. Not only is the effect just on its own really strong, the food support gem thing, but there are so many cards right now in Standard that interact with artifact supports being created and being destroyed. So this card is a combo piece for a lot of things I'm doing in Standard right now. So I think it's a really good card, really worth having. And it's just fun and strong. Definitely one of the best cards from this set. We got number 7, Thunderus Debut. Pick one of the first 4 creature cards from your library. Move that card into play under your control. Bargain. Pick one of the first 4 cards from your library. Move that card into play under your control. So basically, if you bargain, you redo this effect. What is the rank now? It is my number 3 chase card from this set. And so the reason is because a lot of my creature-based strategies right now definitely revolve around creatures that have strong enter the battlefield effects. So my strategy in a lot of these battles is just get my creatures on the board, let them do their thing, create loops with them, use supports to get my creatures onto the battlefield. So once those creatures are on the battlefield doing their thing, I don't really have a big use for most of the supports on the board anymore. And it doesn't destroy vanguards either. So something like Tyvar Jubilant Brawler, it's a great way to make sure those creatures that you just get into the battlefield with this card get to attack that same turn you put them down. So this has become a really incredibly useful and important card in a lot of my green decks. So it's one of the best cards in standard right now, I think. Okay, Virtuous Strength. Support card, enchantment. At the beginning of your turn, increase your mana bonuses by 3 until end of turn. It also has a flip side. I honestly don't even remember what the flip side is. I mostly just use it for the increasing mana bonuses. So, what is the new rank before we go anymore? It is a top 15 card for me. So, the reason I dropped this card down so far in rankings was because most of the time when you need to increase your mana bonuses of a planeswalker, it's because their mana bonuses aren't great to begin with. So if you're waiting so many turns to get this card on the board, and then it doesn't actually start taking effect until after you cast it, it really takes a lot of setup for it to be useful. So it just doesn't do enough for the planeswalkers that really need it. But don't get me wrong. I mean, once it's on the board, it's a really good card. But the thing is, you're just using it to get other cards on the board. So if you're cheating this card out, that means you're probably doing something right with the rest of your deck anyway. So it becomes not as important of a card to have on the battlefield once it's there, in my opinion. If you guys have a different opinion on this card, let me know. But that's why I feel like it's not as nearly as game changing as I thought it would be. Number 5, we got Gen, our Canam Weaver. When this support enters the board, create a white Vigilant Knight token. Target creature you control gains Wicked Roll. When you match an enchantment supports gem you control, that support loses 2 shield. Pick 2 of the first 4 enchantment cards from your graveyard. Move those cards to your hand. Those cards gain full mana. When an enchantment support you control is destroyed, create a white Vigilant Knight token. This effect can trigger only once per turn. So, what is the new rank? It is a top 15 card for me. I think this is a really good card. I think it's definitely worth having, and you should definitely try using it and see how much you like it. You may like it more than me, but the thing is, in practice, this card is not as dominant as I thought it would be. So, target creature you control gains Wicked Roll. Wicked Roll is still really good. It's not usually something I want to build for these days. I did for a while and I had fun with it, but Wicked Roll is still my favorite of the rolls, but it's just okay. Rolls are just okay for the most part. And then the problem I have with the main effect, which is the middle paragraph there, is you need to have room in your hand for those enchantment cards to come back graveyard to your hand. Otherwise, it just doesn't really do anything. Then you're just kind of wasting time with it. Yeah, it just doesn't really do anything for you unless you have the room in your hand. Don't get me wrong, it's still a really powerful effect when it's going right, but it takes a little more setup than I thought. And then when enchantment support controls destroyed, create a white Vigilant Knight token. This effect can trigger only once per turn. That's just okay. So it's a handful of pretty good effects and a card that you can use in a lot of different decks, but it's just not as strong of a card that I thought it would be. It's still good. You should still definitely play around with it, but it's not going to be the staple that I thought it would be when I first reviewed this set. Now we got Shatter Gang Brothers, aka Shat Bros. Shout out to Gauze. Bargain, create 2 food tokens. Destroy 10 gems of your opponent's planeswalker colors. When a card you control is destroyed during your turn, destroy an opposing card at random. What is my new rank? This is the number 2 card in the set for me. Not only can you put it in a lot of decks because it's black, red, and green, you can cheat it out with Meeting of the Five. The only downside, it's not a very strong card in terms of attack. So I tend to keep this card around more as a defense tool that I can then swap out for something a little stronger once I have complete control of the game at that point. And so the effect that it has can just really wreck your opponent's side. If you set your board up where you got all sorts of supports to destroy, then your opponent is going to have a really tough time getting back into the game until they destroy this guy. This is a good card also to play in the beginning when you've fallen behind a little bit and maybe you've got like a support or two, and it's worth the gamble of destroying a support you own in order to clear out your opponent's side so you can get back in the game. So this card does a lot for you as long as your board state allows it. It's the only really drawback to this card is that you do need other things in play for it to be really useful, but it doesn't take a lot of building around, but it's not going to do much for you until it does, and there's a reason for you to use them. But this effect is so powerful that he's taken over some of my decks as my only defensive strategy in it. It's that good. So definitely a chase card. I rated it pretty highly, and it just got even better in my book after using it. We got number 3, Blossoming Tortoise. Everybody knows the turtle, the tortoise, whatever you want to call him. He's so good that he's gotten all sorts of nicknames already. So, when this creature enters the battlefield or attacks, destroy the top 4 cards of your library. Then, return the last creature or support land card from your graveyard to play under your control. At the beginning of your turn, convert X gems to green. X is 2 times the number of land cards you control, including their reinforcements. When a land creature enters the battlefield under your control or is reinforced, it gets +1/+1. So, what is the new rank? It is the number 1 card in the set. I think most people you ask, they will agree. It does so much for you. If it only did one of the first 2 effects on the card here, it would still be worth playing a lot. I don't know if it would be number 1, but it would still be very viable. But the fact that it has both of these 2 effects makes it so incredibly useful. It has a great enter the battlefield effect. A lot of times it has a great gem conversion effect every turn. And so there's really not much more you can ask. It only drawback maybe is that it's only a 3/3, but it only costs 11 mana. It helps to set up so many different strategies for you, and it goes into most of my green decks. There are very few cases where I don't actually use this card in green decks, and it's because I'm doing some very specific strategy, but it's such a utility card. It does so much for you. As soon as you get it on the board, it just continues to do great things for you as you go. So it is my number 1 chase card from the set, and it's probably going to be almost anybody else's that you ask. So what could be better than that? Well, we'll see. Splashy Spellcaster. 2/4 Elemental Wizard. When you cast a spell card, target creature you control gains Sorcerer roll. Fetch the first non-creature card from your library and convert 2 gems to blue. What is the new rank? It is number 10 on my list. So the reason this card dropped down so much is a few different reasons. One, that Sorcerer roll thing, a Sorcerer roll is okay, especially when you're trying to keep a loop going, but it is annoying to have to select every time you cast a spell card. You have to bring up the prompt, choose a card, or choose a creature to put it on, or say not now. It's just a bit of a time suck to do that. It just slows the game down. It means you have to keep pressing the button. And then converting 2 gems to blue every time you cast a spell card is pretty good, but also fairly unpredictable. 2 gems to blue, unless you're just constantly tossing spells out, it takes some time to really actually get a good cascade going with it. It's possible. I've definitely had some good spell loops going with this card. There are more efficient ways of going about it. This is definitely not a bad card. It's still one of my top 10 cards, but it's just less fun to play with than I thought it would be. So that's why I've dropped it down to 10. And this was my number one chase card. I can't believe it when I now looking back at it. Sarah's Sanctum. Support card, land. Colorless for 9 mana. At the beginning of your turn, convert X gems to white. X is 2 plus the number of enchantment cards you control, including their reinforcements. If you don't control an enchantment card, target creature you control gains Royal Roll. When an enchantment card enters play under your control, this support gains 1 shield. So, what is the new rank? It is a top 15 card for me. So the reason this dropped down so much, wow, this was a real huge drop off, was because there's a few things. 2 plus the number of enchantment cards you control. So if you don't have an enchantment card on the battlefield, it's only going to convert 2 gems to white. And so you really need to build around this card for it to make it viable. There's only a few decks that actually use it in anymore, a Johnny being one of them. And he isn't usually lacking in mana gains to begin with. It's pretty easy to get him a lot of mana even without a good land. So this card ends up being a little bit of a win more a lot of times. If you have a lot of enchantments on the battlefield, enough for this to make a big difference, it means you're already probably in control of the game. So it's not usually doing a lot for you. And then gaining Royal Roll is just whatever. It doesn't really do a lot for you a lot of times. It's not worth, building around. Even though, it gets you an extra enchantment support to convert more gems, but it takes a lot more setup than I thought it would for it to be really useful. So it wasn't nearly a plug and play type of support that I was hoping for it to be. And then also right now, I'm not using a lot of enchantments. The enchantments that I'm mostly using are very specific to types of decks that honestly don't really rely on lands that much. So it's just an okay land. I really thought there was going to be more to this card when I first got it, so it's a bit of a disappointment. It's still a decent card. It's still better than a lot of lands we have in standard, but I really thought this was going to be like the next Erixmithis, and it really is not even close. So here is my entire list of my top 10 cards from Wilds of Eldraine. We got Splashy Spellcaster. Virtue of Persistence is one that I probably should have rated higher in my original thing, but it's a card that's pretty useful in a lot of decks. A lot of black decks that take advantage of the graveyard. It's just going to be consistently pulling things out of the graveyard, and you get to pick which one. So that's also very cool. We also got Una, Queen of the Fae at number 8. This is a really good card. It's really hard to necessarily rate it higher than this because there are just so many even better cards in it. But it's a very useful creature card. It gives you a lot of mana, and it keeps getting more and more as you go. Yeah, I did a YouTube short explaining a little bit more of why I underrated it and why I think it's a better card than I thought, even before I got to play with it. But it's a really solid card. I like it a lot. Number 7, Moonshaker Cavalry. Number 6, Virtue of Knowledge. This is a really good card, but it's really good because it's bugged, where the mana field will trigger as many times as you can in a turn. The mana field is not limited to once per turn. So if they fix that, I'll probably drop it down. It won't be nearly as good of a card as it is right now. But as it is, it's a really good loop enabler. So we got number 4, Guillaume Master Chef. Number 3, Thunder. Oh, I forgot. Also, Virtue of Knowledge. This card is really good for my play style because it copies supports. So I like to copy supports that are usually fragile but really useful, such as all the PMA blue mythic supports. Really good to have for. We also got other cards that you want to keep triggering enter the board effects with, such as like Guillaume Artifact Spell Loop that I've created with Urza Saga. Oh yeah, that's another reason that this card is really good, and I will spotlight it in a upcoming video actually. Virtue of Knowledge and Urza Saga. When Urza Saga gets to its third chapter, it destroys itself on entering the board. However, if you copy it with Virtue of Knowledge, you can put it to the end chapter and then just continuously put it back onto the board. So there are a lot of loops that you can create because of that. Thunderus debut, number 2 Shatter Game Brothers, and number 1 Blossoming Tortoise. So, what do you guys think? Did I do all right with my assessment here after playing with the set? I have the entire set now, so I have a pretty good feel for all the cards in it now. So yeah, if you have any comments, anything you want to correct me on or disagree with me about, feel free to do so in the comments. And yeah, I look forward to looking at the feedback, and I'll see you guys soon.